welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sam, and hear me out. She's so nice. She's so sweet. We hear it, we strive for it, we wear it like a badge of honor. I wore it like a badge of honor. But what happens when being nice becomes a performance? When yes is automatic and no feels like betrayal. You feel like you're such a bad person because you just said no to that person. Well, today's conversation is for every woman, of course, and also every man who's ever dimmed her light to make others comfortable. For every moment you smiled through your discomfort, apologized when you weren't even wrong, or you stayed quiet to keep the peace. We are diving deep into the good girl trap, how perfectionism, people pleasing, and chronic niceness don't make us safe, they make us exhausted. And joining me, listeners, is Ludovica Colella. She is a CBT therapist and confidence coach who has walked this exact path. With over a decade of clinical and coaching experience, she now helps millennial women break free from the shackles of people pleasing, anxiety, and low self esteem. Her work isn't about becoming someone new, it's about coming home to who you really are. So let's talk boundaries, burnout, and the beautiful rebellion of being real. So, Ludovica, welcome to the show. I'm so much honored to have you here with us.
Hello, Sana. Thank you so much. Thank you for the beautiful presentation. I really like the idea of chronic niceness. Like, I have to add that to my list of buzzwords, I guess.
Good. That's so true. And I have been badly suffering because of this. This
Mm.
is, even if it's in our workplace or in our personal conversation, for example, in dating, when we
Mm.
to a guy for the first time, um it's a tendency that we keep on saying, yes, I love that, yes, I know, that's nice, yes, that is so good, everything is yes. And the moment we say no, before that person even judges us, we start to judge ourselves. Oh, why are you being so bad, you just said no to a person. And this gets us into such a deep rabbit hole down there. And
Mhm.
that's exactly, you say, that people pleasing isn't kindness, it is self-abandonment. So you can explain that, Ilvika, from your experience.
Yes. Well, um, it's almost like growing up. We are often told certain rules of conduct, right? So how we should be behaving, the things that we should be saying. When it comes to other people, also specifically when it comes to men and dating. So I totally agree with you on that. And sometimes we are not directly told how to behave, but it's like we're handed this unspoken rule book of who a good girl is. And usually that includes like be nice, be helpful, don't cause any problems, be liked, don't be a burden, right?
Mm.
And from that moment, I think, it's if you interact with a child, if you have that in your experience, but you can see them that they are aligned. They just are. They are spontaneous, they're authentic, they are just aligned. They don't have anything else, any belief system that stops them from being who they really are. But then something happens in the development of a child, specifically in the development of a good girl, let's say. And then we start becoming less and less ourselves and more what the world wants us to be, I guess. And so we end up um, prioritizing external approval over our own inner truth. And that's when we start performing worthiness. So if you were raised to be a good girl, but no one really taught you how to be a whole woman. So you have to learn that by yourself. And that's a totally different healing process that needs to happen later down the line. And I hope, and I really hope for most women, this actually development, this healing happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen. So we remain stuck in this rut, as you were saying before, where we over apologize. We say yes when we mean no. We obsess over doing things right or being liked, being accepted. We fear disappointing others, even strangers. Like, we want to avoid conflict, and we feel guilty even after setting like basic boundaries, because most of these behaviors are really um, kind of most of the rules, let's say, that we have, these rules of conduct that we introjected long time ago, are really high. They're really unrelenting standards. And no one can really follow these standards without feeling at some point bad about themselves. So I guess that's the rut you were talking about.
That is so, so true. And yes, now gradually, especially for women, mm, discussion around this people pleasing and in workplaces as well, especially when um, we are trying to understand our actual worth and how we can be more confident in making ourselves seen. Discussions are
Mm,
happening around this, but at the same time, there's kind of over the meaning or the context is completely getting diluted. You know, I mean, others say that okay, if you are supposed to be not nice, then you should be like very much blunt and straightforward. And
mm,
there's a very delicate balance in there. There's a very thin line between having your own holding your own ground and then disrespecting or completely being straightforward, blunt, irresponsible. And
mm.
specifically around women, these discussions are happening. So the actual the actual discussion is kind of getting diluted completely, just like the meaning of feminism is getting diluted. So I want to understand from you, Vika, where should we actually draw the line in there?
Yeah, that's really true. But I think this is happening for a number of reasons. First of all, people sometimes equate assertiveness with aggression,
Hmm.
or let's say setting boundaries with being unkind, or saying no with being selfish. And so they see these very black and white type of situations where either I am, quote unquote, a doormat, excuse me the word, but just so that we understand what we all mean, or I am rude and aggressive. And so it's like I feel and I like to think that people start with that and then they find a middle ground. That's not always the case, but just because you have been acting in a certain way for many years, you have been, let's say, really kind, really present, really um, helpful to the point of self-abandonment within you, you did feel this anger. You did feel this aggressive feeling that you never actually projected outwards because you were not allowed. And so when you start learning that all these things that you were doing, all these behaviors are actually not expected of you anymore, or you can be in another way and there is an alternative way, then sometimes people take it too far, take it a little bit too far the other way. Um, but I guess, I mean, I really like to think that's part of the process at some point. Maybe not, not even in this particular lifetime. Maybe, later down the line, in the next 20 years, 50 years, people will learn, women will learn to listen to themselves, set boundaries, say no, that honor their truth without necessarily being aggressive or being rude in any way. I think potentially this could be part of the process. But I also understand that sometimes people don't really have a compass or don't really have, let's say, um, a a guide. A guide. They don't really know what to do, so they get tired of behaving in a certain way, and they start, they open the Pandora box, and then everything comes out of there. So they start becoming more rude or more aggressive, and then it kind of loses the idea of the main purpose of it. It loses its meaning, like you said, it gets diluted because then you know. maybe it was better before at that point. So I guess, but yeah, I really like to think that's part of the process.
That definitely makes sense. Definitely makes sense, Ludovica. Okay, now let's talk about the right guidance. But before that, talking about your journey, you describe hitting emotional burnout before change really started, and
Mhm.
that is terrible because um, burnout, it starts with your mental health, with your emotions, and then your body exhibits those symptoms, those signs. So it's like
Mm.
communication is happening between your mind, body, and spirit as well. So why does it often take a crash for people pleasers to finally pivot?
I think that people pleasers and perfectionists as well are so conditioned to act in a certain way that they rely so much on these spoken or unspoken conscious or subconscious rules of conduct that they forget about themselves. They forget about their emotions, they forget about their body, and they forget about everything else that's going on in their lives because this set of rules and beliefs are basically centered around the core fear. Like, for example, for a people pleaser, a core fear can be a fear of unworthiness or being unlovable, being unlikable. For a perfectionist can be a fear of incompetence or a fear of failure. But when you have a whole belief system that is built around these fears, then basically your mind is always thinking about danger. Is always scanning the environment and the situations that you have around for dangers, for triggers, because the main goal is to keep yourself safe. And so you're constantly in a state of fight or flight. So that's really exhausting for the body to be always like so full of, hormones, adrenaline, cortisol that can make you act on impulse from one moment to another. So that's also something else, just to link to what we were saying before. Uh, the people pleasing response is actually the third response that we know, the third anxiety response that we know, and it's the fawn response, right? But when it comes to anxiety, you also have the fight response. Sometimes you can feel anxious because you're about to maybe make a mistake or you maybe made a mistake already. And if you are a perfectionist, that for you feels like it's a huge deal, although maybe it's not, but in that moment it feels like that. And so then you start becoming more restless or more aggressive or more snappy in general. And so that also then impacts on your relationships. And, that is tiring because it's tiring for you and it's tiring for other people, but also it's tiring for you to realize at some point that it's not just perfectionism in the workplace, it's actually impacting on the way your body feels because we also somatize in the body. It's impacting on your relationships, on your stress levels in work, outside work. And so it's really impacting on your whole self, really. And we are constantly running away from disapproval or rejection. And let's clarify that here we're talking about fear of disapproval and fear of rejection. um and at that point you get yourself into burnout situation where you give so much, and basically even passion is taken out of you. You don't care anymore about your job, you don't care anymore about the things that you used to care about. You are not motivated, and because you gave too much, you gave everything. And that's also true for relationships where we end up being in emotional debt. So in emotional debt, so we overgive and we undernourish ourselves. So there's always this imbalance that you carry on with you. And I guess that's the most exhausting part. At some point, you're gonna realize it's gonna, be so obvious that something is off. And then, when people come to the session, and I did that myself with my own therapist when I did my own sessions, they say, I have an anxiety problem. And I'm like, maybe that's the tip of the iceberg, but what's happening? What else is happening there? It's not just the anxiety. Yeah,
Mm. Of course, that's kind of a symptom, but what exactly is the root cause down there? That's
exactly.
makes sense. Makes sense, Ludovica. And this brings another important question to my mind, and which I have been still facing, is that we, let's say we have the self awareness, we have the self realization, we are mindful of the fact that we are a serial people pleaser, and that's kind of draining uh, ourselves, emotionally, physically as well. But then I guess the hardest part is to communicate that to someone else, whether it's in our workplace or in our family. As you mentioned about that, somebody who was a caregiver is kind of, now in an emotional debt. It becomes really difficult to communicate because that, again, the person who is communicating, they might assume that, whatever I'm saying, the person will take it in a different sense, or they'll think that I'm now acting as selfish, or I'm changed, or this is something who I am not. So again, there's kind of a judgment in there. So that's why it's better to steer clear away of such kind of discussion and let me sort this out on myself. And that's where, we kind of get into that rabbit hole of keeping everything to ourselves and thinking that, nobody's going to understand me. So how do we embrace that? How do we navigate through that?
So I guess when it comes to people pleasing, like as we were saying before, you end up favoring external approval over inner truth. And if you do that for enough times, then that becomes the basic default response that you have.
Mm.
When you start realizing, this is what's happening and it's making me feel this way, and you increase your awareness about, let's say, the issue, and you want to change, then the reverse process has to happen. What you want to
Mhm.
get at is maybe, I mean, obviously favor your inner truth over external approval, but also you don't want to get too far the other way, as we were saying last time, in the last a couple of minutes ago. But
Mhm.
the idea is that when you learn to favor your inner truth, then it's not like you don't care about what other people think of you, because we all care. We are humans. Um, but the importance that you put on that, like you're kind of more willing to risk it. You become more willing to risk it, not because you don't care, but because you know that there is a cost to favor the external approval over yourself. The cost is how you're feeling right now.
Mhm.
And if you continue like that for the next 10, 20 years of your life, that's how you're going to keep feeling, and potentially it's going to be worse. Well, if you try and change the way you communicate with other people, the way um, favor yourself, your inner truth, then in that moment you are risking it. I'm not gonna lie, that's gonna happen. But the good relationships, and that's the good news, the good relationships are gonna stick around. People who understand you, they're gonna keep understanding you. Maybe sometimes they need, a period of adjustment, let's say, but they're gonna keep sticking around. People who were benefiting from you being in a self-abandoned state, they will
Mhm.
they will not be able to quote unquote use you anymore. And so that's when you see the relationship is going to change, because they're just going to move away from you. You're not any any more useful to them that way.
Mm.
So there is no right or wrong way to communicate something that is so delicate. But I would say your main concern can be on yourself rather than how the other person is going to react. Other people, people can manage disappointments. People can. People, they can manage like worries. They can manage negative feelings. You don't have to manage that for them. And so I guess that's what I also would like to say. That's what I would like our listeners to go away with. Like, when you overgive, or when you try to be helpful, when you try to help make people happy all the time, you're trying to manage their own emotions. When you say it as it is, when you speak your truth, you stop doing that, because that's their turn now. They have to manage their own emotions. And if you do it for them anyway, it's not very empowering, isn't it? It's disempowering for them. But you have to step away from that role of the fixer, of the helper, of the hero, and you have to align to who you really are so that they can do their own work. If they don't like what they hear, then they have to figure out why. But that's on them.
That is absolutely right. It's kind of a litmus test. But I think the focus should be on ourselves. That
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. And that's, I guess, I believe that, your confident communication lab, it focuses on boundary setting with grace. And just to, let our listeners know, if you can share a real world example of this shift in communication, how it created a positive change in any of the people that you worked with. Uh, I mean, our listeners would love to know that.
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways in which obviously before, for example, we were talking about people pleasing, and then we were talking about being more, on the aggressive side. Obviously, imagine these two stances as being as the end of a continuum. So on one side of the continuum you have more of a passive communication style, so you don't really talk about what you feel, what you need, what you want. You are more dismissive of your own needs and feelings, and that makes you quote unquote self-abandoned, meaning you're not in tune with your body, you're not in tune with yourself. And that's when actually then the problem happens, that you are very easily conditioned when you are in that state. When you if you look at the other side of the continuum, that is where the more aggressive side comes up. And sometimes we can jump between one and the other without actually finding a common ground, as we were saying before. And in the middle of this continuum, you have the assertiveness. So assertiveness can be kind, assertiveness can be um, generous, it can be present, but it starts from the assumption that my need and your need are on the same level. When it comes to the passive communication, you believe that other people's needs, subconsciously, of course, other people's needs are more important than your own. When it comes to the aggressive style, you believe that your needs and your preferences are more important than the other. When it comes to the assertiveness side, is this they are on the same level. So I am on your same level. My needs, my preferences, what I want is on the same level of your needs, of your preferences, and what you want. So this is already a reframe. Okay, a reframe of um, what of let's say of the subconscious beliefs that lead communication. So I am okay, you are okay. So we're both on the same level. And from this side, from this stance, let's say it's really important to start considering that this also has other implications. For example, the way you feel, your emotions are coming from you. It's your responsibility to handle them, to be aware of them, to recognize them, and to regulate them. So things like you make me feel mad, or you make me mad, or you make me feel jealous, or you make me sad. These things are not things that we would say if we are speaking for an assertiveness stance. We will talk more with I type of statements. So I feel sad because this happened. I feel angry because I saw that. Or I feel anxious because I thought that. So that's the number one rule, really. Focus on the way you feel. Bring you in the conversation. Don't bring the other, bring yourself. That's how I feel. And then obviously you have to also shift the perspective from saying yes all the time, or being, let's say, submissive in your communication, to actually make requests and be open to compromise. It's not like people pleasers don't compromise, because they're good at that. It's too much compromise, so they don't put themselves in on the table. So that's what I need. I feel, for example, I feel tired because I need some rest. Would you mind if we go out another day? Okay, that's a boundary.
Yeah.
I feel, I need, and then the request. The request is basically a boundary that is saying not tonight, but in a very nice way. Okay. So you're not saying no to that person. You're giving like a rain check no. Like, not today, but tomorrow I'm fine. Today I need X, Y, and Z.
Mm, mm. Yeah. that is more approachable, and it's not very sugarcoating, or it's not very straightforward. It's like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, right? It's real. It's just real. So when you talk in I statements, it's really difficult for people to get offended because you're
Mm.
talking about yourself. You're not saying, like, even when it comes to conflict, for example, you make me angry because you didn't wash the dishes and the kitchen is all dirty, stuff like that. That's starting an argument. Because if I say to you, you make me angry, then suddenly you did something and you feel attacked, and then you're going to defend yourself in whatever means, which could be
Yeah.
either attacking me back or it can be getting defensive. And then we have a problem. If I say, I feel stressed when I see the kitchen so dirty, would you like would you mind creating like a routine together with me so that we can decide who washes what when? That is a different way of putting it. Right? 'Cause
Absolutely.
I feel when I see, and I am telling you something that we can do together. So it means that you're also responsible for this in the same way I am, so that we can fix the situation. But I'm not attacking you personally. It's really difficult to feel attacked if I say I feel stressed when I see the kitchen this way. Let's work out a solution. You know?
Mm. No, that is something so many of us, completely ignore, but it's so
Yeah.
important. The way we talk, the way we communicate, professionally, personally, it makes such a huge difference. And this is not only for leadership or specifically for women, I guess for all of us. For all of us.
Yeah, I actually, since before you asked me for an example, I just remembered something. I had a client, she was a journalist. She was really, really busy. And her manager kept like asking her for favors, giving her new tasks, new projects, and she kept saying yes. To the point that obviously she went into burnout, and that's why she reached out for the sessions. Basically, she told me about an episode with her manager where her manager asked her to do something on top of what she was already doing.
Mhm.
And she was like, I'm not really sure. That was her people pleaser response, perfectionist response, right? I'm not really sure. And the manager said, well, that's a no then. So whether was, the intention of the manager, we don't know because that all happened via text. But her manager was basically teaching her, if you can't, it's a no, and there's nothing wrong in saying no. That's a no then. That's fine. Just say no. And so from that point onwards, we started working on assertiveness. And then there was an episode in which she had to like push back on some of the projects that she was assigned, some extra projects. And she was like, I'm really at capacity now. I want to work on my schedule to kind of see if I can welcome some of these tasks. I am sure I cannot, fulfill the whole request at the moment. And she was like, "Oh, that's so good. That was such a good no. I'm so proud of you." So the manager appreciated when she actually started saying no clearly, because also, let's say, from an organizational point of view, from a leadership point of view, you want to know if your employee can do something or not. And sometimes that creates a bit of a problem when you're not honest about your limits. You need to be aware of your limits and you need to communicate them correctly in the workplace, or as truthfully as you can, so that you can also give the information to your boss, your manager, whoever is above you, and they can work with that information. Otherwise, they're going to be oblivious to wherever it's happening for you.
Well, Rebecca, in the interest of time, before we wrap up, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and explore more about this, how they can do that.
Okay, so I have my website, which is lu-cole.com. And then I have quite active on my Instagram, which is Ludovica underscore Colella, my surname underscore coaching. So you can follow me on there. You're going to find all the information that I have on my website and all my offers and services.
That's good. I'll make sure to have all the links and details in the show notes. And Ludovica, thank you. Thank you so, so much for
Thank you.
sharing your journey, your tools, your lived wisdom. I mean, this is so, so empowering and so useful for all of us, especially for women. So thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you so much for having me.
So to everyone listening, being nice is not the goal. Being honest, aligned, and whole, that's the real liberation. So, to everyone listening, if we have been shrinking to fit someone else's version of quote unquote good, may today's conversation be your permission slip to stop. Take a pause, think about it, be honest, aligned, and whole. And a huge thank you to all of you for being a part of the Mindful Living show. To connect with Ludovica, just refer to the show notes and explore her powerful boundary setting course, the Confident Communication Lab, and learn more about her coaching work through the links. Until next time, this is your host, Sana, signing off from the Mindful Living. And remember that your voice was never meant to be quiet. Thank you.